Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to break down my biggest winners from day one of the 2024 NBA draft. And yeah, it was day one. They've, of course, split it into a two-day affair now. I gotta say, I was not the biggest fan of it going into this process, and after it's happened, at least the first half of it, they've got to make some changes. There was no reason that round one alone should be 3 hours. That's the typical length of the full draft. They really stretch it out. A pick would be in for about 5 minutes. We still wouldn't know who was selected. Way too much just happening in between selections. Hopefully they cut down that runtime a lot next year if they keep this format. I did a live stream, went into it saying, okay, yeah, I'll live stream the full first round. How long can it be? 3 hours is the answer. So I'm exhausted, but I still want to go ahead and recap this draft because it was really fun. We saw some guys that really rose up boards, went way higher than we were expecting, guys that fell down boards, maybe some potential steals later in that first round. We saw a couple of moves being made involving players and picks. It was a fun one. So I want to go ahead and break down what teams I feel like did the best here on draft day one. And I want to know your opinions. Let me know down below how you think your team did. What would you grade them? And I'm not going to talk about every prospect and pick in this video because it would just be way too long. So if you want to know my thoughts on any individual prospects I don't mention in this video, you can go ahead and comment them down below, and hopefully I can get to most of your comments. Let's talk about it though. Starting off at the top with the two teams that made the big trade before the draft started with the Deni Avdija trade. The Wizards and Blazers went ahead and made a move with Deni going over to the Blazers in exchange for pick 14, a 2029 first round pick, and Malcolm Brogdon to the Wizards. It was a shocking move because we weren't sure if Deni was on the market as one of the better young established core pieces on that Wizards team on a great contract. And I feel like if he was moved, it would probably be to a contending team. I know a lot of Thunder fans wanted us to go out there and get Deni, but he goes over to Portland. And for the Blazers, I love the idea of this transaction. You get a young player on a great contract who was really good this past season, fits a potential position of need. Maybe he makes Jeremy Grant now obsolete, so you can try and move off of his contract. There have been a lot of rumors surrounding him throughout the early going of this offseason. I like to pick up a lot. It feels like they capitalized on a Wizards team that's trying to really bottom out and got a great player in return. As for the Wizards, didn't love the transaction because, again, Deni is good on a great team-controlled contract for a few years and was one of the only established core pieces, but I do think they did a pretty good job in the draft to make up for it, so I'll give them some credit there. I'll give them a pass. So let's talk about these two teams did, because both of them I do consider overall winners of the day. With the Blazers, in addition to getting Deni, they get Donovan Clingan, who fell to them at pick 7. A lot of reports that the Grizzlies really wanted to trade up for Donovan Clingan, weren't able to get a deal done with the Hornets at 6. The Blazers were even reported as having interest in trading up for him, and instead, he just lands in their lap at 7. And some people are confused, saying that, oh, they already have DeAndre Ayton, they have Robert Williams, why are they going for a big? Because I don't think either of those guys are going to be fits as like the long-term center. Neither one of them are really on the timeline that the rest of the group is, like Scoot Henderson, who's supposed to be one of their stars going into his second year. Shaedon Sharpe is pretty young. Simons is a bit older than those guys, but also a relatively young guard. Ayton isn't like old by any means, but he doesn't feel like they want him to be like their franchise center. Robert Williams is really injury prone. He just missed basically the whole last season. So I think getting a big man that can grow alongside these young guys and they can develop that chemistry from day one makes a lot of sense. And now those other two guys are expendable. You could trade DeAndre Ayton if a team is looking for an upgrade at the big man spot. I think that's entirely possible. Robert Williams, the team could maybe buy low on him now, again, with the injury that happened last season. You could move him off your books. I think it gives them a lot of flexibility. Clingan was one of my favorite prospects in the draft. There were reports he could have gone as high as number 1 to the Hawks. Instead, they get them at 7, a prospect that they really liked, that they didn't even have to move up for. Great defender who's going to help clean up a lot of the mistakes that happen with some of the guards. He's got really good skills as well. He's got a great feel for the game. It seems like he wants to develop an outside shot too. If he can do that, that only makes him more and more valuable. I like Clingan a lot. It gives you great size too. The shot blocking is going to be there from day one. I like this pick a lot. I think between getting Deni and bringing in Donovan Clingan, the Blazers had a home run night. In addition to the Wizards, who again, still don't love the Deni Avdija trade. They did get Malcolm Brogdon back, who they can flip for another asset. I would imagine that happens right around the start of free agency. They got back a pick at 14, which they used, and I like the selection. So overall, it's not the end of the world, and they did again save it with a great draft class, starting off with Alex Sarr at number 2, who was my number 1 guy in this draft. It felt like he might have gone to Atlanta if he didn't decline their workouts. Made it pretty clear he didn't really want to be there, wanted to instead be in Washington, and that's where he lands. He's going to be a great addition to the front court there. Him, Bilal Coulibaly are going to form a menacing defensive duo over the course of these next few years, and I think he's a great building block for Washington to grab in the early goings of their rebuild. Then beyond him, at that pick 14, they get a guard, which they definitely needed in Bub Carrington, one of my favorite players in this draft. I like Bub's game a lot. Again, they needed somebody to be that guard of the future. He's really young. He's going to make a lot of mistakes. It's going to take him time to become the eventual player that he's going to be, which I think could be a really good guard, but that's fine. The Wizards have plenty of time. This is the perfect player for them to pick up here in the early stages of their rebuild, let him develop, make those point guard mistakes, and grow alongside Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, and any of the other young guys they keep on this roster. I like this pick a lot. Bub, some people talked about him going to like the Thunder at 12, could have gone even higher. Some people had him falling a little bit. I think this was a perfect spot for him to go here to the Wizards at 14. And then Keyshawn George goes to the Wizards. They grab another pick in the 20s. They take it from the Knicks at 24, and they get a knockdown shooter, really interesting potential 3-and-D wing in Keyshawn, who could fit really well in that front court next to Bilal Coulibaly as well as Alex Sarr. You could form those three guys in that front court. Bub Carrington is one of your guards of the future. It feels like they got multiple players that could be big time cornerstones for them going forward in this draft alone. It's a really good class. Like, this is a number of all three of these guys were some of my favorite players in the entire draft class. I think they did a phenomenal job, especially if they flip Malcolm Brogdon for future assets too. We'll see what that looks like. But overall, despite the Deni Avdija trade still being a little bit weird to me, I think the Wizards might have had my favorite class overall. Next, we've got to talk about potentially the biggest steal of the draft with Dalton Knecht falling to the Lakers at 17, a guy that was mocked by a lot of people as high as 6 to the Charlotte Hornets, going somewhere in that top 10. Falling out of the top 10, felt like, okay, that's the furthest he's going to go. I don't know anybody who projected him to fall all the way to 17 in the Lakers. Go ahead and snag the SEC leading scorer, a bona fide bucket, knockdown three-point shooter, can create his own shot. He is a bit older, but that's perfect for the Lakers. They want to compete right now. It feels like he's going to contribute from day one, the perfect player to put next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I don't know why he fell this far. Maybe it is because of the age thing, which I feel like we should have learned after what happened with Desmond Bane, that just because a player is a bit older, you shouldn't pass up on them. If you feel like they can contribute and be an integral part of your team, bring him in. The Lakers went ahead. They did that after all these teams passed on him. I think Lakers fans are going to love Dalton Knecht. I know the Lakers have had a lot of issues with finding consistent shooters over the past few years. I've got no doubt that Dalton Knecht is going to be one of those guys, especially now that he's got to be more fired up than ever with all these teams passing on him and letting him slide all the way here to nearly the 20s. I love this selection, and again, might be the biggest steal of the entire draft. JJ Redick hit this one out of the park. Plus, I like the idea of him being coached by JJ Redick, who was kind of in a similar shooter mold. Apparently, according to Rob Pelinka, right after they took Dalton Knecht, or JJ Redick rather, was like starting to draw up plays that they could use for him. I think it's going to be an amazing fit there in LA. Home run selection for them there at 17. Another team that I felt like did a really good job are the Minnesota Timberwolves, and this wasn't expected because they only had one selection here in this draft at pick 27, which they ended up using to take Terrence Shannon, who is a bucket getter, somebody that can give them immediate offense coming in. He's a bit older, feels like he can contribute right away. It was a great pick for the Timberwolves, a team that really needs extra punch in their offense, but that was the second guy they got to do that because they also traded for Rob Dillingham, taking the Spurs' number 8 overall pick in exchange for a 2030 pick and a protected 2030 swap. Picks that are way down the line. The Timberwolves continue to spend their draft assets, which is a little bit scary when you get, that far away. 2031 doesn't even feel like a real year. But the Wolves are closer than they have been in maybe ever to competing for an actual championship. The West and NBA as a whole feel pretty wide open outside of the Celtics, who are a powerhouse. But it feels like the Wolves have a real chance to win the West next year, so you've got to shore up some of your biggest needs, and Rob Dillingham gives you a bucket getter. If there's one thing he can do, it's get you buckets. He can play make. He has a really small frame that is a bit of a concern. Maybe he doesn't contribute that much in year one, but as he continues to develop, I think he could be your point guard of the future. Mike Conley is getting up there in age. You need somebody to eventually replace him. I think Rob Dillingham can be that guy. I was not expecting the Timberwolves to be the team to trade for this 8th overall pick. When we heard it was being traded, I expected maybe almost any other team other than Minnesota, but I think it was an amazing move for them. I like it a lot. And yeah, between him and Terrence Shannon, the Wolves had a really good draft class to address that issue of lacking some offensive punch, specifically at that guard spot. Then we've got the Utah Jazz, who are one of my biggest winners of the draft last year. I love their class between Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks and Bryce Sensabaugh. They did it again. They once again brought in some great players that I like, that I think complement those players quite well, like Cody Williams at pick 10, a versatile forward who showed some really fun slashing traits, some really efficient scoring at times, great finishing. The volume wasn't insane, and there was an injury towards the end of the season, which did hinder a little bit of his production, could have dropped him down the boards a bit, but Cody was a really fun player to watch. I think he's got great upside. I'm excited to see what he does over there in Utah, and even if he doesn't become like his top end outcome, I think at the very least he's going to be a versatile and productive forward for years to come, which is great for the Utah Jazz, landing a player that can just, I would imagine they can pencil in as one of the pieces that could be there for quite some time and give them constant contributions. Then they get maybe the biggest slider of the draft. In fact, he has to be the biggest slider of the draft. And Isaiah Collier out of USC, a guard that has relentless rim pressure, has great size, is a really intriguing player that a lot of draft people I talked to thought could go as high as like the top 12 picks, top 15 picks. Many of them, even though he wasn't going to go in this range, had him as like a top 6 or 7 player on their big boards. He falls all the way to pick 29. It reached a point where I just kept saying to myself, this has to be Collier, right? This has to be him. And it just wasn't. Over and over again. The Jazz get him at 29. I think a lot of teams are going to regret passing on him all the way to that point. And if he turns into the player, he can become that again. A lot of the people I talked to that really know their stuff thinks he can become. We're going to look back at this draft class in the past 2 for the Jazz and think, how did we let them get away with this? Once again, massive success from the Jazz in back-to-back years. And finally, I've got to go ahead and talk about my favorite team in the Oklahoma City Thunder and how they did in this draft. I don't know if I consider them as big of winners as some of those other squads, but I do think the Thunder had a really nice class. Now, I know some Thunder fans are upset because they didn't draft a big, like, I know we need size, but please don't forget that the Thunder have $30 million in cap space going into free agency. They've got a lot of room to go ahead and add those players that can make trades. And I like the players they picked up a lot, starting off with Nikola Topic at pick 12, a guy that before his ACL injury, many considered as a lock to go top 5, top 4, maybe even top 3. Some people consider him one of the best players in this class, period. Topic is really fun. He's a super creative playmaker. He has a lot of ability to get to his spots on the floor, even though he's not like the most explosive athlete in the world, has great size for a ball handler, and that's something the Thunder continuously prioritize. I've seen some people try to compare him to Josh Giddey 2.0. He's a lot better finisher than Josh Giddey's handle's a lot tighter. The shooting form looks a lot better. He's a great free throw shooter already. So despite the 3-point percentage not being quite there yet, there is a lot of promising aspects that make it seem like he is eventually going to be a pretty solid 3-point shooter. Not to mention, he is the youngest player in this entire class. So the Thunder, who probably weren't going to get anybody here at 12 that would have contributed right away to a team that is really deep and is only going to add more pieces, it feels like, throughout the offseason, is trying to contend for a championship instead. They add a guy in Topic who isn't going to play this season because of the ACL injury, or at least that's what Sam Presti is indicating right now. They can go ahead and give him a year to rehab, to develop, and then next season he could come in as a jumbo playmaker, ball handler off the bench. I mean, you could even, if you find the opportunity to make a big-time trade, deal him because he's considered one of the highest upside guys in this class. I like the selection of Topic a lot. The Thunder do need more playmaking. They need more shot creation. That's something that you can never have enough of, so I like picking up Topic a ton. And then Dylan Jones at 26. The Thunder trade 5 second-round picks to get back into the first round like it was rumored they wanted to, and get a guy that is a very interesting prospect because he's a guard, like kind of a forward, because his height is right there in the middle of those two positions, but he's also huge. Like, he's got a lot of size to him physically. He was averaging right around 10 rebounds per game, over 20 points per game. Didn't shoot the best from 3, but he's a knockdown mid-range shooter. The free throw percentage is promising. A very confusing player. Like, he's 6'4", I believe, 6'5", 235. He is bulky. I've seen a lot of people compare him to like a Josh Hart type of player, which is great. And I know he doesn't bring the rebounding that maybe like a big could, but he brings great positional rebounding and feels like a player that can contribute right away. Or you can have him off the bench as a guy that I think can contribute in spot situations. If you have some injuries, I think he can step up. So I like this draft class a lot. I think the Thunder did a good job of finding 2 players they like, guys that can play make, put the ball in the right spots for their teammates, put the ball on the deck. It's something the Thunder are trying to build out, this roster of guys that could all do that at least a little bit. So if you're a Thunder fan that's freaking out thinking, oh, we made this massive mistake, what did we do? I promise it's going to be okay. We'll get a big through some route throughout this offseason. And honestly, I wouldn't have wanted a rookie big to step up into that role anyways. I would rather we get a veteran and use that cap space, which is what I think we're going to do. Hopefully with Isaiah Hartenstein, if you ask me. But yeah, those are the teams I mainly want to get into. Now I want to give some shouts to some fun selections and landing spots throughout the draft. Like Reed Sheppard to the Rockets. I like that pick a lot. He's going to be a knockdown shooter for them. Really intriguing over there with Amen Thompson as a future backcourt. I think they could be special. Stephon Castle going to the Spurs. Everybody was mocking that at number 4. Made a lot of sense. You get Wemby, a guard that can finally, hopefully, get him the ball. I think that's going to be fun over there too, especially with the defensive upside of Castle and Wemby as a duo. That's insane. Devin Carter Carter to the Kings. I like that selection a lot too. Carter quickly became one of my favorite players in the class. Got that dog in him. He's going to be a physical, gritty guy over there for the Kings. Can step up into a potential starting guard role even from day one. I feel like if they wanted to trade Kevin Huerter for someone else, I think he could be that and be ready to contribute from the first moment he's out there in the NBA court. Have him as a bench guy. It doesn't matter. He's going to make an impact on winning from the first second he is out there. Jared McCain to the Sixers. Like that selection a lot too. Brings them some shooting. A guy that can handle the ball. They're a blank slate of a roster. It's Embiid. It's Maxey coming back. Paul Reed and Ricky Council. That's it. We've got no idea what they're going to do with all that cap space, those roster spots, but I think Jared McCain is a great start. Love his fit over there in Philadelphia. And De'Ron Holmes to the Nuggets. Another guy I really like. He was one of my favorite players in this class. Would love if the Thunder got him. The Nuggets always seem to be the team, though, that was going to land him. They traded up. There were rumors that they had promised him that they would select him. And now the Nuggets get one of the best backup bigs they've had in such a long time. It's no more DeAndre Jordan, who's like 40 years old. It's not Zeke Naji. I think De'Ron Holmes is going to be a revelation for them as a backup big behind Jokic. Also, I did like Matas Buzelis over there to the Chicago Bulls. He's a Chicago kid. He fell down the draft board. A lot of people thought he was going 5 to the Pistons. The Bulls land him. There are some question marks surrounding his fit overall, but the Bulls are also a big work in progress roster. So if I'm them, I'm not really worried about that. And also, I will say Ron Holland to the Pistons is really intriguing. I think he's got some of the highest upside in this draft. If the shot comes along, may end up being the best player in this class. The Pistons needed shooting, so it's not like an ideal fit. But with how bad the Pistons were, I don't think you can draft just for fit right now. You have to still go with swings. They've got a bunch of cap space. They can find shooting in other ways. So I think that pick was perfectly fine as well, even though I know some people don't love it. But yeah, with that being said, those are my initial takeaways from round 1 of the draft, my biggest winners. Let me know down below in the comments if you disagree with any of these takes. What other teams do you think did a good job? Because there are plenty more. I just, of course, didn't want to talk about every single team in this video. Let me know what you think your favorite team did. Who are you looking for your team to grab in the second round of the draft and free agency? All that stuff. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Ray1, say it back.